This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Hey, Jason, just wanted to send you a quick message of gratitude. I'm so grateful that I got into the game and got in with properties that make sense because the rent income keeps coming in. So thank you. Glad we connected, and I'm glad to be in the income property game instead of the Wall Street game for my future.
Welcome to the Creating Wealth Show with Jason Hartman. You're about to learn a new slant on investing, some exciting techniques, and fresh new approaches to the world's most historically proven asset class that will enable you to create more wealth and freedom than you ever thought possible. Jason is a genuine self-made multimillionaire who's actually been there and done it. He's a successful investor, lender, developer, and entrepreneur who's owned properties in 11 states, had hundreds of tenants, and been involved in thousands of real estate transactions. This program will help you follow in Jason's footsteps on the road to your financial independence day. You really can do it. And now, here's your host, Jason Hartman, with the complete solution for real estate investors.
Welcome to episode 1975. So if you are watching this on video rather than just listening on the audio, you see that my lazy dog is sleeping in the background, right? And that leads me to a thought. I want to talk to you for a moment before we dig into today's show, which, by the way, our guest today is awesome. It's Oren Klaff. He is the author of a couple of great books. One that was hugely famous called Pitch Anything. And this is a great show. He's going to be here with us on Wednesday again because it was a long interview. We covered a lot of stuff and you're going to get tons of value out of this. Now, this leads me back to this idea of the sleeping lazy dog because I want to talk to you for a moment about my industry and just society in general. The general zeitgeist of society, and this is of course, been this way for many, many years, longer than I've been around, is to follow sensationalism, to follow clickbait. In the internet era, that sensationalism turned into clickbait. And that is that the most outrageous titles on a podcast or a YouTube video, they get all the clicks. The most outrageous theories, that gets all the attention. And in a time like this, you might be surprised, and we talked about it for 2 episodes last week, that I'm not going to talk today about the banking crisis. Why is that? Well, it relates to this whole clickbait thing. It is shocking to me how successful the clickbait strategy is. It works, folks. It really, really works. You know, I remember a good friend of mine during the pandemic, he was putting out videos about how the real estate market is going to crash. And everybody was asking me about him. What about so-and-so's video about the real estate crash? And the complete opposite happened. Now, we never know what's going to happen. You know, as Yogi Berra said, the future ain't what it used to be. And that's certainly true. The future ain't what it used to be. And nobody knows the future. Of course, you look at the most powerful entities that the human race has ever known, governments and central banks, they don't know the future, right? Even with all of their information, and not only their information, which is much better than the information any of us have, they can't predict the future. And they get to influence the future much more than we do, right? We have this little tiny amount of influence on the future. You know, it's like throwing a pebble into a pond and these concentric circles as the water kind of moves away from the disturbance, the pebble, right? Well, they can throw boulders and boulders and boulders into the pond and they still can't control the future. So what am I getting to here? I guess a few points before we dig into today's episode. Number one, when my business was struggling many, many years ago, not this business, but another business I had, a traditional real estate company, I bought this company back in the late 90s, and it seemed to be cursed with bad luck. Like every problem, every huge problem that could possibly happen, happened to me. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And as you may or may not know, I'm like the most persistent person in the world. So, you know, even though all these problems. They might get me down for a while. I'll just keep persisting. I'll just keep going. I just do not stop. That tenacity is something I learned as a kid. Thankfully, a lot of it from my mom. She always said, Jason, finish the job, finish the job. And by the way, that's not always the smartest strategy. Sometimes you should just abandon the job and do another job, right? But anyway, it's how I am. It's how I'm wired. So I remember I was talking to a friend of mine, well-respected person in the business world. And I said, what should I do? I mean, it is just, these are like just overwhelming problems. I mean, most people would just totally give up, right? I bought a business that was part of this big network. The network broke up, had all these other offices in it. It broke up, and it was just a complete mess. And then 9/11 happened, and that was a, disaster seemingly. But it ties in with what I'm going to say here, right? But here's the wisdom my friend said to me. He said, Jason, keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on the ball. And that was very good advice. So as we go through these turbulent times, and it's going to be a crazy turbulent year, in my opinion, in the news, you're going to hear all sorts of things. There's going to be more bank failures, more bank fiascos. But just like 9/11, those terrible terrorist attacks from 9/11, everybody thought the world was going to end. And what happened? What few people talk about, really, is the response to the disaster, the crisis, from the two most powerful entities the human race has ever known, governments and central banks. So they just kind of miss that response. They talk all about, and look at my friends on YouTube are doing this, on their podcasts they're doing this. And I'm not going to mention names, okay? But many of you listen to them also, okay? They're talking about the end of the world, crisis this, crisis that. And they're not wrong, okay? The crisis is the crisis. Okay, so what? Keep your eye on the ball. The response to the crisis, oh, by the way, the dog's waking up as you see back there. You got to watch me on video, by the way. The response to the crisis, since we live in a bailout culture, and there is really no reason that won't continue. Since we live in a bailout culture, since people and the economy and the voters cannot tolerate pain anymore, they just got to get a bailout. And last week we saw bailouts. I mean, the Fed is now pumping more money into the banking system with this new lending facility they created, up to $2 trillion someday, some people say. Okay, so think about how big $2 trillion is. If we've got a GDP that's a little over $20 trillion for the country, $2 trillion, that's almost 10% pumped in through this new lending facility. And that's just the beginning. That was only a week, right? That's nothing. They're going to do more. And if we have more bank crises, I say they'll do even more. And just like after 9/11, when everybody thought that was the end of the world, and including me, I was worried about it, of course, too. I remember going into this brand new office I set up in Irvine, California. I signed a big lease. That lease was, maybe I was on the hook for like $700,000 of that lease, right? And, adjust for inflation, that's like $2 million today or something like that. Real inflation, it's probably actually quite a bit more than that, but I'm not calculating it right now. And, I was definitely worried. But what was the response? The response was to make this historic decrease in interest rates, to pump money into the system, to provide aid all throughout the economy. The leaders around the world met, and what do they do when they meet? The only thing they ever do, essentially, which is quantitative easing, money printing, or some flavor of these things, right? I'm not saying they're necessarily the same name. They have different fancy names for them. Operation Twist, that was a good one. But the point is, it floods the markets with money. And what is the reaction of that? Well, it's inflation, and it's good for real estate investors, right? So we'll see what the Fed does at their next meeting. Are they actually going to hike rates again? If they do, I'll be surprised. But maybe they will. I don't know. Inflation's a problem. But given the choice of what they have, whether it's going to be a banking crisis where people lose faith in the system, or let inflation run rampant. I say they're going to vote the way they've always voted, and that vote is going to be for more inflation. Now, they're never going to say that, right? But inflation is the business plan for governments and central banks and rich people. It's the Cantillion Effect, okay? It benefits the insiders, and it benefits us if we play our cards right, and if we use my trademark strategy, inflation-induced debt destruction. So that's going to be the response, folks. That's the likely response. I mean, look at the critics, and we've done many shows on this over the years. The critics, the Fed and the government in general, for not bailing out Lehman Brothers. I mean, the criticism was just massive for that. Look at the rhetoric that came from Bill Ackman over the last week and a half, and so many other billionaires in the community, right? It is a bailout culture. So what we've got to do is keep our eye on the ball and do our thing, number one. But number two, one of those balls, or part of that ball we have to keep our eye on, is what is going to be the reaction from the elite class, from the governments and the central banks. And it is just likely to continue as a bailout culture. That is the business plan. That is the thing that works best for them. Always, whenever you're making a deal, or trying to assess what is going to happen, or trying to assess risk, or trying to mitigate risk, always walk in the shoes, or as they say, walk in another Indian's moccasins for a mile before passing judgment, right? That's probably now considered like politically incorrect, although that's the saying. Look at it from the other party's point of view. They benefit from inflation. It hurts the poor and makes more people dependent on government. They're going to launch a digital dollar. I predicted that at the beginning of the pandemic. Just go listen to my old episodes. The CBDC is definitely coming. This will accelerate the need for it, or not the need for it, but, the need on the side of the other party, the governments and the central banks. They love it. They're going to get a lot more control over us. They're going to create a lot more inflation, and they're going to bail out their friends and the elites. And that's just the world we live in. And philosophically, it sucks. I hate it. It's terrible. But I'm a pragmatist, and I know how we can benefit from it. Our real estate investments benefit from it dramatically. We still have very low inventory. We still have a shortage. Let me show you some visuals on this. This is an article. I just took a screenshot from it last week. Housing experts say we have a national housing shortage. This is current data. This is not old, okay? Even when considering all the new multifamily options, which, by the way, the multifamily housing market, the apartment market, is oversaturated. So there's an oversupply coming online, and already a lot of it's already come online just recently, of multifamily. But that will even correct. When those units get absorbed by renters, that will correct, okay? But the single family market is even more undersupplied. And in the entry-level homes, it is radically, dramatically, viciously undersupplied. With 2.06 million new households formed in 2022, just in 1 year, over 2 million new households formed. National household formations continue to outpace new home building. Homeowner vacancy has dropped from 2% in 2012 to just 0.8% in 2022. Folks, this is a massive shortage. There are like no vacancies. And if you're looking for properties, this is true. Okay, there is an incredible shortage. Take a look at this one. So this is a CNN article. The housing market is short 6.5 million homes. And this is a March 8th article. Washington, D.C., CNN. The United States is not building enough homes to account for the number of people setting up their own households. As a result, there's a sizable shortage of new homes after more than a decade of underbuilding relative to population growth. I want to say something else about this before we get to Oren Klaff. This does not include shadow demand. And I've talked a lot about shadow demand. And that is the boomerang generation of the millennials and now the Gen Zers who are living at home, who should be forming households. They're living with their folks. Eventually, they will come out of their parents' spare bedroom or their parents' basement or their parents' attic, and they will form a household. It's just going to happen. The article and these stats don't even consider the shadow demand. Now, during the Great Recession, they talked a lot about shadow inventory. We have the exact opposite problem now. We have a shadow demand problem, not a shadow inventory problem. Inventory, way, way lower than demand. I'm going to show you a chart on that next, okay? The gap between single-family home constructions and household formations grew to 6.5 million homes in the last decade. However, this figure overstates the housing shortage since new multifamily homes offer options to buyers and renters. If multifamily construction is included, which is predominantly rental units, well, it's all rental units. I don't know why they would say predominantly. I mean, okay, so they could turn some of those into condos, right? I get it, but that's a small number. The gap is cut to 2.3 million homes. Okay. So that's if they're willing to accept an apartment rather than a single family home, right? Then it's not as bad, but it's still pretty darn bad because let's look at inventory in just a moment, okay? In the last decade, 15.6 million households were formed during the same time, 13.3 million housing units were started, and 11.9 million were completed. So the starts and the completions are different. This includes 9.03 million single-family homes and 4.2 million multifamily homes. Of those, only 8.5 million single-family homes and 3.4 million multifamily homes are completed. Okay, this is shocking how bad, how ferocious this is in terms of a housing market and what it says for society and family formation and what it says for the opportunities for investors. Because this is talking about the overall market. They don't segment by price. So the average new home is $475,000. But what that doesn't tell you is that a large percentage of those homes are built in the areas where it's more profitable to build them, more expensive markets. Okay, so none of these are suitable as entry-level properties for first-time home buyers, and none of them are suitable to convert to rental properties because they're just too expensive and they don't have those good rent-to-value ratios. Anyway, let me just show you these inventory numbers and move on because I'm going too long, so I'm not going to go through the rest of this article, but it's all there for you. It's on the screen. If you want to take a screenshot or just pause it and comment below and tell us what you think of it. But folks, look, the simplest thing in economics is the law of supply and demand. We all know that. And here's the latest inventory figures. We should have about 1.2 million homes for sale. We only have just over 400,000 homes for sale. Remember the sink metaphor. The faucet represents new inventory, new homes coming on the market. It's at a trickle. There's hardly anything coming on the market. The water in the sink represents existing inventory. So if a full sink means you've got all the inventory you would normally have in a normal market, the sink is only about 40% full, or it's less than 40% full. Okay, it's maybe 33% full, 1/3 full. Okay, it's missing 2/3 of the inventory. And then the drain represents the absorption, the buyers buying properties. Well, the drain is a little plugged up because sales are down. So sales are down anywhere between 20 and 35% approximately, depending on what area and what price range. So less properties selling, keeping more people in the rental market, activity down, but inventory way down. Now, normally, if the drain was plugged, the faucet would be filling that sink right up, but it's simply not happening. We've been waiting a year, a good year, with these higher interest rates now for that sink to fill up and overflow. Just not happening because there's just no inventory. And this is much more acute in the entry-level housing market, the properties that make good sense for real estate investment, for rental properties. The fix and flip market, it's almost dead. There's very, very little activity there. So with that knowledge, keep your eye on the ball, don't fall for the clickbait, and remember, to the extent that we have any crises of any sort, whether it be terrorism, COVID, pandemic, banking crisis, the answer to any of these things by the powers that be is pump money into the system. Bailouts, lending facilities, quantitative easing, whatever you want to call it. Okay? There's a million little variations of all these things. And you can waste a lot of time going down the rabbit hole trying to understand and figure them all out. But that's all, to some extent, a distraction. What's important is keeping our eye on the ball, right? And we know what's happening. We know exactly what's happening in simple terms of supply and demand. That's what matters. Now, if this flips, if we start to see the sink filling with water, if the foreclosure rate goes way up, if the bankruptcy rate goes way up, if unemployment goes way up, then let's talk again. Okay? But right now, we have the complete opposite going on. All right, so let's get to our guest. This guy is a rock star, Oren Klaff, the author of Pitch Anything and Flip the Script. Everybody is in the business of using persuasion, especially if you're in the sales business. Okay, and I would argue that everybody is in the sales business. Do you want to get your kids to do something? Do you want to convince your spouse or significant other to do something? Do you want to convince your boss to do something, your employees to do something? You've got to be good at the idea of pitching. Are you raising money for your investment or your company? Oh, this is going to be a super important show for you. So let's get to our guest today, Oren Klaff, the author of Pitch Anything and Flip the Script. This is really, really good stuff. So enjoy. Hey, everybody. It is my pleasure to welcome a guest that I've been wanting to have on the show for many years, ever since reading his first book entitled Pitch Anything and his new book entitled Flip the Script. And it is none other than Oren Klaff. Oren, welcome. How are you?
Hey, thank you, Jason. I am well. My agent told me if I stuck it out for 10 years, I'd get invited to a podcast, and it finally happened. So this is amazing.
Yeah, well, you're just way too humble. But your books have just influenced a lot of people. They are excellent, great work on that. And, we're all in the business of persuasion, aren't we? We're in the business of selling our ideas, whether it be to our kids, our significant other. Most people think of it in a business context. You're doing a presentation, you're pitching to investors or your employees or staff or your boss, depending on what side of the table you're on. But this is just something that is universal. It applies to every single person on earth, and it is a very, very important skill. So with that, I don't know,
well,
take us where you want to go first.
When I went into the publisher, some years ago with Pitch Anything, they were like, we're not doing this stupid book.
Really?
And then, yeah. And then my agent was like, it really applies to everything and everybody. It's not just a business book. And then the McGraw-Hill read it and they go, this applies to me, I'm like,
yeah, right.
Yeah, right. And so it does. And so, for example, just really quick, I went to a meeting at an investment bank on like a $10 million deal. It wasn't a real estate deal, which is, I know, the only thing you care about. But, there's other deals, Jason, in the world. All right.
No, I like all kinds of deals.
Calm yourself down there. There's other kinds of businesses. So I go into investment bank and I'm in their conference room, and there's 25 interns and associates in there. And I say to the guy I'm doing a deal with, hey, this is a $10 million deal. I'm not sure we need like this big of a deal team. And they go, oh no, they're all here just to get signatures on their book. So, so I get a lot of that feedback. I mean, but the best thing that ever happened to me, we were in Hawaii. And my son was 3, and we woke up early. 3-year-olds wake up early, and we went out to try and get something to eat, and just we're on Maui, and we saw a guy was in a jet ski store getting his jet skis ready and putting coconut water out and everything. We walked up, started talking to him. He goes, "Yeah, what? You're Oren Klaff?" I'm like, "Well, no." And they're like, "You are," and he goes, "Listen," and he tells me his whole story. "You're the reason I have this business." And I'm a native Hawaiian. I live off in the hinterland on a farm. I never would have. So those are the stories that investment bankers can go f themselves. They're going to make money anyway. But
that's right.
When you hear those stories, so yeah, pitch is really important for all walks of life. And I think how I stepped into this is I had the same conventional thinking that everybody else did. You be nice to people, you be thorough in your work, you be, you chase deals, you'll always be closing, you look for angles, you show people what you can do, you be very companionable. If somebody asks you for a proposal, you send a proposal, you bend over backwards, you give them, if you're going to be at the lake, your grandmother's lake house for the weekend, you give them the fax number there and,
right.
And your backup phone number in case.
So the traditional stuff you're saying, of course, say please and thank you, keep your promises, over deliver, all the good stuff that, all of us have been taught. And it's good stuff for sure.
How
but
to be super fucking nice and win great friends.
Right.
I read that. I was given that by a sales manager.
Sure.
And so, I was in this piece of infrastructure that was read in on that. And then I was in a deal and my business partner, he was probably a $40 million guy at that time. And I was a negative, $40 million guy at the time. Well, not even that much, just like negative zero. Right. And so we're in a deal. I would have gotten $400,000 or $500,000 on the closing. And the investor started being difficult. Emails were going back and forth. They wouldn't sign the final paperwork. And my partner just sends one email, all caps in the subject line, lose my number. And I go,
very nice.
Oh my God. This, I can't believe it. Like all my dreams, everything, like I'm going to have to go work at, Starbucks. I don't know what's going to happen next. Right. And I was just sitting there holding my head in my hands and bing, it was Microsoft, mail at that time. And it binged. I look and they go, oh, so sorry. We're wiring right away. We're closing immediately. We know we've been difficult. Really. And so that was like my first entry into like a different world in which you do not have to be needy. You don't have to chase people. You can have a set of your own values and want to close the deal, but still not put up with people making you fetch rocks.
Yeah. So that's frame control. And I know you talk about frame control a lot, but before you go into the frame control thing, like give us an overview of the basic pitch anything method, if you would. Like what's the overriding philosophy on it?
Sure. So I think the overriding philosophy is again, I know, Jason, you only gave us 11 and a half minutes, and each of these overriding philosophies are 25 minutes in and of their own. But I had hired a psychologist when I started getting an understanding of my partner, like what he was doing, right? And we had made some money then, so I hired a psychologist for $10,000, like to unpack what he was doing, and and I expected him to go through all these narratives and show me like the psychological persuasion, because it's not what I was good at. And so I go to his office. He was in a science lab at UCSD, and I get in there and he goes, oh, I'm sorry, you hired the wrong kind of psychologist. I'm a cognitive psychologist. We don't care about feelings or emotions or transactional conversations. I'm like, he goes, you just didn't do your research. You hired a cognitive psychologist. We only care about how information moves through the human brain. And I go, okay, well, since I paid you $10,000, what can you tell me about that? And he explained to me how information actually gets into the decision-making areas of the brain. And that was really the foundational philosophy of pitch anything. So it turns out you think information goes into your neocortex, this smart frontal lobe of your brain where it's, you go, hey, it's an 18% IRR, 6.5% cash on cash, 3-year hold, multifamily infill Florida, in which the fix and flip is, $200,000, and the ROI on the cap investment, is 42%. And if we do a 5-year hold, it's a 21% IRR with a sane exit strategy on a 7 cap. Right. You have that narrative, and the person listening to that goes, you think it goes into their smart part of the brain because that's what you think with, but really it enters a part of the brain that is much more focused on eat, kill, mate. And so you're saying all that stuff, and they're literally, and you felt this in your own mind. I'm hungry, and also, is this somebody I should kill? Right.
Or should I mate with them?
Or should I mate with them and then kill them? No, bees do that. And the fundamental processing input regions of the brain, we ended up calling the crocodile brain. And that's where your information enters. And it is chopped up by such gross, generic, big filters that all of the messaging that you're starting with is lost, right? And it's just going, what is this dangerous? And then ultimately the neocortex will go, hey, I'm being asked to do some work. And it will start shoving instructions down to these lower parts of the brain, which is, have I ever seen this before? Have I ever solved this problem before? Do I think I can solve this problem without the super high expensive functioning parts of the brain? Can I push this problem to a different part of the brain? Or can I guess what the answer is without having to engage?
Okay.
And so that's the instruction set of the mind of the person you're trying to sell at 18% IRR to.
Okay.
So the way that you start to communicate with someone and the way that they input that information into their mind are widely disparate. Then the next thing is, if you can sort of wiggle, and the way you get past that crocodile brain is you raise the stakes, you make it visual, and you make it novel, and you make it in story form. We don't have enough time to get in all that, but nobody here is a dummy. Visual, high stakes, novel, new, intriguing, survival based, and around human narratives. Buildings. A guy once told me, buildings are only worth what the people who go in and out of them do with them, right? And so you probably have like that. But so even real estate needs to be framed in human narratives. And so that's how information gets past the crocodile brain up into the rest of the brain. The problem is there's another big section of the brain, the midbrain, that evaluates social status. And you cannot access the decision-making part of the human mind from a low social status. So if somebody perceives himself to be powerful and you to be low on the social food chain, a couple behaviors exhibit.
They're not going to listen to you, in other words, right?
They'll listen to you. They will see you at a superficial level, right? So they don't see your character. They don't see your value. They don't see your experience. They see you transactionally. The second thing is they will take risks around you they would not take with a high status person. They're not going to slap you on the butt in today's world, but they'll pick up their phone, start texting, say, excuse me, maybe take a text, take a call. Those are the kinds of things they'll do. They'll interrupt you.
Oh, that's what you mean by risk. In other words, they'll act badly, right? Okay,
right. Yeah. They'll take risky behaviors around you, things that if they were at Bank of America trying to get $100 million ABL, they would not do, right? Oh, can you hold on? This is my gardener. I got this, right? Oh, this is my contractor. He needs to know what color chartreuse, we're painting the bathroom. So they would not do that at the Bank of America decision committee because that would be a high stakes environment for them. So they'll see you superficially. They will take risks around you, and they will be very transactional in nature, right? And until you raise your status, and they will also not feel any urgency to proceed with you.
Yeah.
Right. So from a low status position, it is very difficult to pitch or sell anything. So now you're starting to see the thesis emerge, right? Yep. Information needs to be set up as high stakes. You need to be set up as high status. It needs to follow a narrative that investors and buyers think in. That narrative tends to be around humans, not around buildings or IRR. It needs to be novel or can't engage the upper regions of the brain. And it needs to get around this instruction set, which says, if I can guess what this is, I don't want to work on it. I'm just going to jump to the guess and then use the resources of the brain to solve some other problems that I think are more important. So you believe when you start talking, you're just sending a fax signal, to that same part of the mind in the person you're talking to, and that is not in any way true. And so this is why neediness, I think was chapter 2 in the book. Neediness kills deals, not necessarily because needy is a bad thing. It's because it's super low status.
Okay, so that's the frame control part, and that's excellent. So, everybody, as you're saying all this, I think now that they understand that, they're agreeing with you, but they're asking the $1,000,000 question, which is, how do I do that? How do I increase my status? How do I make it urgent? You didn't say it that way, but essentially, how do they do all these steps? There's lots of stuff about being a good storyteller, tell human stories you talked about, right?
Yeah.
But first, let's start. Frame control is what you start with. So I think that's maybe the first one, right? How do you increase your status?
Yeah. And just a pet peeve of mine. I mean, I bought, because it's my job, every single book on how to tell a story, how to tell a business story, right? And I'll tell you what those books are about. Right. How to not tell a business story. So we can touch on that or do that next time. But that is 100% done wrong in all those books. What they try to do is take the movie architecture, and put it into a business environment,
like a hero's journey.
A hero's journey,
yeah, okay.
Right? That's not a pitch.
Right.
Hero's journey is good for your origin story. Where you came from should be the hero's journey, but a pitch, is not the hero's journey. But so first of all, I would say start simple. If you're talking to someone who perceives that they're higher status than you, which is basically any investor, right? And your mom. But when I get on call, I have to get on call with $1 billion funds, as you do. I've been on call with, probably 13, 15 billionaires, many $1 billion funds, but $100 million fund, 10 million. And typically they'll just show up late.
Yep.
Because it's a busy world. They're busy. We've wheedled our way into a larger organization than us. They perceive themselves as busy, and they are busy. And they come late. And so when you talk about frame control, I'll start these calls up and I'll say, hey, Jason, welcome to the 11:05 call.
Okay, so the appointment was at 11, in your example, and you're saying that to the billionaire, welcome to the 11:05 call, right?
I've done this 1,000 times and multiplied that. The guys in my program, and in Pitch Anything have done this 10,000, thousands of, more times than that.
Sure.
And they will always go, I'm sorry. Every single person, from the Shark Tank guys on down, know in our culture, time is money. There's nothing more valuable than time. Promptness and it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire. It's just a mark of professionalism and personal integrity, right? Mm-hmm. And so immediately, the call is starting out with them saying, I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And then, you just start light. And I will say, hey, I'm really excited about this call. And this will sound needy for a second, so don't let the whole thing unfold. So I'm really excited about this call. We've been wanting to meet you guys for a long time. We actually prepared a presentation. This is fantastic. If we did a close with you, this would be, you guys would be one of the biggest firm, and we're excited to be here, and I can't imagine a firm we'd like to work with more. But
so it seems like you're giving up a little bit of frame there,
right? So that would be neediness. That would be neediness 101. So think of every needy thing you could possibly say. You could just keep going, right? I'll give you my secret cell phone number. If you can't reach me, and we do a deal, you could call my wife and she'll come find me. But I was looking on your website, and there's a couple things that are on there that are confusing to me and don't make sense why someone in your position will be doing these things. So I did a little digging. I saw some, videos and blogs, hard to understand what's behind it. And I want to clear up some things about you before we'd actually be able to do something. So as much as it's our job today to present our program to you, what we're doing, how it works, the ROI, IRR, hold period, comparables, and everything like that, we do have to reserve some time because it's also our job to do some important diligence on.
Okay, so there you're flipping the script for sure, yes. Right? You're making them earn it a bit. So that's frame control. Anything else on frame control?
Sure. There's hundreds of things, right? Right before this one, they'll say, hey, send us over these slides and, the deck. And, if you can also send over a proposal or a term sheet, we'll take a look at it. If we have any questions, we'll get back to you. Then I will say, well, a proposal or a term sheet, sure. What would be in it? Should we talk about that? For business guys, it would be who you do SaaS software or service agreements or professionals, professional advisors. They'll always get, hey, send me over a proposal. Great. Happy to do that. We don't do proposals. We do agreements what will be in the agreement? So let's talk through that. So that would be another very clean version of frame control, because the follow-up to that, these aren't, this is not Zig Ziglar's 99 ways, close a deal. It's true. The morality, the moral center frame. So, I say, look, firms that are not busy, that's what they have, a department that all day long sends out proposals and does follow-up on proposals. We're busy, right? If we have an agreement, we'll write it up. But let's get some basic deal points. We can do it now. We can set another call to do it.
I get it. The proposal is usually a blow-off thing, so I got you there. Yeah.
So that falls under this, right? Like, hey, I won't do this for you, but I will do it with you.
Okay.
And that is frame control 101, which is, listen, I'm not going to work harder on your business, on your wealth management program, on your investment portfolio than you will. That makes no sense, right? You have all the upside, and we're providing some of it, but I'm not going to work harder on this than you will. I won't do this for you. I will do it with you. So that's frame control 101.
Okay.
Right. So I think this is a very, this that's up on the screen here. Hey, glad we could finally get our calendars synced up. I know you're as busy as I am. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16 words.
Right. Yeah. And that's a frame control too, because you're notifying them that you're busy too, just like they are. Yeah. Got it.
It's a time frame. Your time. Sad to notify you of this, Jason, but the reality is your time is not more valuable than mine.
Right.
Your firm is much larger than us. You guys did a deal with Yahoo back in whatever. That's very exciting, but this deal is now, and I'm as busy as you are. It's important to get our calendars synced up. And as much as you are evaluating us, we also have to leave some time where we can evaluate you and decide if anything we should be doing together.
That's an example of course, frame control, but it's also flipping the script, right? I mean,
yes.
Are those synonymous?
I would call this setting the frame.
Okay.
So I think after this is very simple stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Frame control implies a level of control, and you're pulling levers. So when you're controlling something, there's risk and reward. So these are things that anybody can do without any follow-up, because you're just setting the frame. And, by frame, it's like you're setting the boundary conditions that you can hold the counterparty accountable for. And that's why I call it setting the frame, and it is under frame control. Okay. So, this is another one. So counterparties love wasting your time, right? So they'll say things like, hey, we're not clear about the market size. We need to see more about the comparables. We'd like another Argus run, that shows a different, look on it, all these kinds of things. And again, now this would be frame control, right? We're super busy and pretty choosy about how we work with. And we also need to be pretty efficient on our time.
And I think this is excellent stuff. I just want to make sure we cover more of your work. So,
sure.
If you want to jump from the frame control topic to moving in deeper into your stuff, feel free. But it's up to you.
Yeah. The reason is, Jason, this is stuff that people can actually do this afternoon, right? I want to get into status next, and I think So some interesting topics around status. Let me share one more of these that, somebody can do.
Sure.
And then we'll cruise through it. This is for the business guys out there, right? It's like, this falls in terms of frame control. What I see people do is whenever a buyer or investor asks a question, right? The seller or the offerer feels like they always have to answer every question, right? And so this is a pretty good example. Like, oh, hey, how much is it? Or what's the valuation? Tends to be a good one, for deals, right? Well, we already know what the valuation of the price is, right? It's more than you want to pay and less than I want to charge. When we get to value, right? When we get to valuation, look, I promise you, it's straight down the middle. It's not going to, it's not 30 times, revenue kind of deal, but we don't even know if we like each other. We don't know if you have the capital available to do this deal. We don't know what kind of deals you actually do, with your capital. We don't know how you behave as an investor, and you haven't really seen key assumptions on the pro forma of the deal. Let's just say, let's get to all that stuff, right? We'll get to valuation. If you don't like it, opt out. But, at the moment, just suspend disbelief
Right.
That when we like turn over the piece of paper and there's a number on it, you go, yeah, that's what I thought.
Yep.
And so those are all frame. You don't have to answer every question. You do have to reframe the question as confirmatory diligence and not something really worth spending time on at the moment. Then you get into subjects and flip the script. The reason people, I think in terms of pitch and close and really getting a deal, across the line and funded, falls apart on certainty. So what happens is people can like the asset, they can like the deal, they can be excited about it, they give positive feedback around it. There's lots of conversation, paperwork even starts moving, a data room opens up, multiple presentations, and it really feels like there's momentum and go forward, right? And then ultimately, these things can hit a stall point. And the stall point is just the certainty was not high enough they like it, but they didn't feel that once the capital changed hands from them to us, that they would actually get the delivered results, largely because of you. And I think certainty, the core of certainty, comes from your expert status, the understanding of you as an expert in this particular domain.
That's how you're going to convey certainty to their mind, that they're talking to an expert, right?
Correct. So you experience this all over your own life. Like you go to a mechanic and you go, there's something wrong with my car.
Oh, I think it's software is that, because tech is so complex, right? It just never works like you think it's going to work, right? So you buy a new software program and,
100%.
you spend a fortune and the project just turns into this disaster. I mean, been there a few times.
And that's why the certainty problem exists.
Yeah.
Right? But here's the way if I just use a car, like what kind of car do you have? Do you have any old crappy cars?
No old crappy cars.
Okay, I do. I have a bunch of cars, but I have a 1983 Toyota pickup. So old crappy cars still drive around. So you take it to the shop, and and they go, yeah, it's making a noise, tick tick tick. We hear, leave it here, and it's $350 to do the assessment. We'll tell you what we think it is. If you decide to get it repaired here, then we'll credit
put that toward the price, right?
Credit toward the bill. Yeah. And you're like, just in terms of certainty.
It sounds fluffy.
That you're going to get your problem fixed on an old car. Like it's not great.
Right.
Take it to another mechanic, like this mechanic I have, he's 68 years old. And he comes out and he goes, yeah, you know what? Hang on a second. Press on the accelerator. Okay. Yep. Okay. This light came on. It shouldn't be, you know what this is? This is the throwout bearing. So it turns out Toyota used in 1983, 84, some throwout bearings that weren't fully tested. This is the 321705 bearing. These always failed at 60,000 miles. You got 70,000 out of it. If you don't repair it, then what will happen is go all through the driveline. You're going to end up $12,000 through the driveline. We actually keep the replacement, which is a titanium new threading bearing, the 27403.
Yeah. This guy's got certainty.
I've done 7 of these a month for the last 15 years. Yeah. What do you want to do? It's $700. Leave it here. Come back on Thursday. We'll have it done for you.
Yeah. Right.
That is certainty. So
interestingly, I think the customer also perceives that upfront fee that you mentioned in the first example as a real lack of certainty on the part of the vendor that, you're going to get anything, because you probably spend $350. They won't fix it. And if you apply it toward the bill, you don't really know what the ultimate price is going to be. So they might fluff up the bill to offset the $350 they charge you. So I agree that second example is far more certainty.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.